It has been a while since I have done a chat, but I wanted to get on and talk about something because it's time specific. So today is July 25th. Yesterday was July 24th, and the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke in front of Congress to the protests of people who are not for the actions that are currently going on, and raised Hamas flags in our capital. And the day before that was a Jewish holiday or a Jewish fast day called the Fast of Tammuz. And so I personally found the choice of this date really interesting. The last time Mr. Netanyahu spoke in front of the Congress, he did it on Purim, which is a holiday that commemorates a victory over the Persian people. And long ago, the Jews prevailed against an assassination plot that had been put forth for the whole Jewish race that was at the time exiled in Persia. And so he chose that date to come and speak to Congress about the existential threat that Iran has for the region and for Israel specifically. And so when it dawned on me that he was speaking the day after the Fast of Tammuz, it made me want to come on and talk about the significance of that and what is the Fast of Tammuz and what is Tisha B'Av, which is connected to that date, and why do we care, and what in our day, what is playing out on these dates is I think that history is prologue, that it matters. What came before matters and should affect the way that we view the things that are happening in our time. It provides context for what's happening in our time. And so in order to set the stage for these fast days or these Jewish commemoration days, I want to go back to ancient Judaism. So the Israel and Judea and Israel were two separate nations, and the temple, which was the center of all the worship that God had handed to Moses, centered around the temple, the sacrifices and the feast days, which were appointments with God. Like the Jewish people had an appointment with God on 7 times during the year. These were appointed feasts, and they were times set aside that God called on for him, for their relationship with him. So all of that was centered on Jerusalem and on the temple. And so the first temple was built by Solomon, and that temple was sacked and destroyed in 586 by the Babylonians. And so then when Israel returned, so they went from Babylonia to being exiled in Persia, and then the Persian king, Cyrus, said, you guys can, they were eventually told by a Persian king that they could go back to live in the land and to build their temple and worship their God. And that's what happens. And so the second temple had reached a glorious stage. Herod invested a lot of money. The Romans kind of set an atmosphere so the temple got rebuilt into, at first very modestly, but then eventually it became really quite fabulous again. And so the Romans, so Jesus was, most scholars believe, 33, 35 AD is when he was on the cross and raised again. And so then by 70 AD, the tension between the Jews and the Romans had reached a point where, and the Vesavius and the different people came in and from the Romans and they sacked Jerusalem. They tore down the temple, and that was in 70 AD. So the second temple was destroyed, and the Jews were dispersed. And the Jews were dispersed for the rest of history until 1948, when they were officially allowed to come back. Yes, in the 1800s there was some migration, but the real official return was in 1948. So 70 AD to 1948. Well, the commemoration, this is part of if you just the amazing hand of God in the events that unfold that we know as history. And one of them, to me, is the concept of Tisha B'Av. And Tisha B'Av is the 9th of Av. The Jewish calendar is lunar, so dates vary from year to year. And as juxtaposed to our calendar. And so coincidence or the hand of God? I happen to believe the hand of God, but the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, when the Babylonians destroyed the first temple, that was the day they destroyed the first temple. Well, the Romans breached the walls of Jerusalem on the fast of Tammuz. So that would have been July 23rd, the day before Netanyahu spoke in front of Congress. That was the fast of Tammuz, and it commemorates just the sadness of the coming defeat. And so then 3 weeks later, which is the 9th of Av, they destroyed the second temple. And what's quite extraordinary is that day of sadness, which this people group has commemorated for 2,000 years now, and even before that, because it was the destruction of the first temple as well, has a long list of things that happened on that very same date. So when tragedy reached the Jewish people, the big tragedies almost always came on Tisha B'Av, and I just wanted to go through some of them. When the 12 spies came back, it is written in the Mishnah that one of the tragedies was that Tisha B'Av is connected to the only two of the spies said the land is good and God can deliver this to us, which was a great tragedy. The Bar Kokhba revolt, which was in 135 AD and signaled again another phase of the great defeat of the Romans and the dispersing of the Jews around the world, and that happened on Tisha B'Av. And then you go through, and in 1096, the first crusades were commissioned on, didn't write down the exact date, but they were commissioned on Tisha B'Av, and thousands and thousands of Jews were killed as the Crusaders made their way across Europe, and that started on Tisha B'Av. In July 18th of 1290, the Jews were expelled from England. July 22nd, all of these are Tisha B'Avs. They're just when they happened on our calendar. 1306, on Tisha B'Av, the Jews were expelled from France. And in 1492, on the 9th of Av, they were expelled from Spain. Himmler got his approval for the final solution on Tisha B'Av of 1941. The Germans entered World War I on Tisha B'Av. These are all things that were great tragedies for the Jewish people, and they all happened on this same date. And so here we are, and Israel's leader comes to our country, and we raise the flag of his enemies and declare a day of rage against the actions that they're taking. And I find it interesting because it is a day of sadness for them, but also I would contend for us.